test. dingetje kan je gewoon helemaal buigen, deze.
Ah ja.
Dan kan je deze in je zak doen. Dan kan je gewoon buigen tot hij lekker zit.
Ja. Tuurlijk.
Goedendag, welkom allemaal en fijn dat jullie er allemaal zijn. Kleine drukje vandaag, maar dat is helemaal niet minder.
Prima toch?
Amer, bekend spreker, inmiddels al eerder geweest bij ons, gaat vandaag een praatje over Alexa.
Yep.
En eigenlijk een stukje klein demootje laten zien.
Ja, zeker. Ja.
Nog net in elkaar gedraaid vlak voordat je hier kwam.
Ja, ik ga hem zo uitleggen.
Succes allemaal.
Ja, super, dankjewel. Ik doe hem in het Engels overigens. Kan iedereen me horen? Ja, super mooi. Welcome everyone, and welcome to this talk about Alexa. I'm going to talk all about how you can create it. But first, I would like to start off with something that we all use on a daily basis. All of us do, and that's the human voice. So the human voice is something that we use on a daily basis without even thinking about it. We use it to communicate with everyone else. I can talk to someone and say, how are you doing? And there's all kinds of stuff that we do with it, but we don't really use it for something digital, right? So that's where things like the Amazon Alexa or the Echo come in, but also the Google Home and stuff like that. So it's a very good instrument to do stuff. It's even better than most interfaces can do, and we can put in a lot of detail and actually control how we say something and also give some emotion to it and stuff like that. So that's what I wanted to give back to what we're doing right now. So we're going to use the voice to actually do something in the digital world. And how we do that is actually through Alexa skills. So the Alexa skills that we are going to create now are actually programs that are going to run, and they are going to output stuff, and you will actually hear the Echo say it. So let's start off with how an Alexa skill is built up. So the most important thing about this is the invocation. So the invocation is actually kind of the name of the skill that you're going to do. And how we start with that is actually that we always have a beginning. So we have ask, begin, or launch, or those are kind of examples that we can use. And then the invocation name. And how that's going to work, I'm going to show in the demo. But that's one of the biggest things that we are going to use within the skills. Also, the intents that you saw at the end, those are kind of the actions that we want to do. So you can say, okay, hello world, please say hi to someone. And you'll see that in the demo as well. But those are the kind of actions that you want to trigger based on what you're asking to an invocation. And basically what we do is actually that we map that intent to a function. And that's something that I'm going to show as well. But it means that everything that you put behind that and that you use as an intent, they will actually be mapped to a separate function that's going to run. So now comes the part that we were talking about. So I was going to use Flask Ask, and then I think on Friday I kind of realized that the project is dead. So it was a little bit of a it was a switch. So I was like, okay, I have to use something else because this is not going to work, and I'm not going to show you guys something else that's not supported anymore, and it's not going to be supported in the future. So we're not going to use Flask-as, but what we are going to use is the Alexa Python SDK. So they created the SDK, or software development kit, for Alexa. I think it's made around a year ago, something like that. And we're going to use that to actually create the skills and deploy them and stuff like that. As I said, we're going to use functions, so we're going to use AWS Lambda for that. And AWS Lambda is basically functions as a service. I don't know, has anyone used Lambda before? A few people. So I'll show you all about it and show you what it does, but it is basically all the functions that you create a normal program with, you can just put on AWS and you can run it without actually hosting your servers and stuff like that. So I'll show you how that works. Another one of the key things that we're going to use is the CLI. This is something that they built later on, but it drastically makes it easier to deploy skills. So it makes it easier to just by command line commands, just deploy a skill or update it or whatever. So I'll be using that as well. Let's go to the demo. I think that's the best way to learn it. So the basic demo is going to be the hello world, and that's also one of the templates that they provide. So we're going to jump into that. I haven't set anything up yet for the hello world part, so let's see. Can everybody read it? Okay. So the ask CLI works in the way that you have to just type ask. When you do that, it will give you the options that you have. It's all bunch of options, but the most important one, when you first set it up, it will ask you to do the init, and the init is basically saying, okay, I have to set up some configuration for me to be able to deploy new skills and stuff like that. So the interesting part here is that I want to start something new, so I just type ask new, and it will kind of trigger a wizard. So I have to pick what I'm going to use. I'm going to use Python in this case. Then it will give me a bunch of skills that are going to be used as templates. So I can use the hello world one, and I need to give it a name. So I'll give it the name hello world. And what this does is actually, it gets some, there's a project for this on GitHub. It gets me the folder with all the configuration in it and everything set up. So I can go into that folder. And you'll see all kinds of folders, but also some config files. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's actually in that folder. So when you first set up the project, you have the first. Can everybody see it? A little bit like that. When you first set it up, you have this first folder, so the .ask folder, which has a config file. So this config file basically tells Ask CLI about the deployment and the deployment configuration and stuff like that. So what it actually does is you can see that it will create a Lambda function, and it will also say that the runtime is Python 3.6, but also the handler. And the handler I'm going to explain a little bit later on, but that's actually what's going to be triggered when you do talk to the echo. The other one is the .github, but that's basically because it's cloning from that repository, so that's not that interesting for the skill. Then you have the .venv folder, and that folder is basically the whole virtual environment that the skill will be made in. And it will be copied over to another folder that I'm going to show in a second. But that's where all the requirements and all the dependencies are going to be set up. Then we have the hooks folder. Well, the hooks folder was actually one of the folders that I was like, okay, what does it actually do? But when you do a command to the ask CLI, it will actually run one of those two scripts. When you set it up the first time, it will actually do the post new hook. I can open it and you can see what it does. It actually creates that .vn folder and installs all the dependencies and stuff like that. And the other one is the pre-deploy hook. So before we deploy our skill, it will actually do this script, and this script is basically creating a folder that's going to be packaged and be sent to setup on AWS Lambda. Then the instructions is basically just the instructions how to set these things up. And then we actually get to the actual skill. So we have this folder Lambda, which has by default has these two things. So the hello world .py, but also the requirements.txt. The requirements only has this SDK as a package, so that's pretty easy for this example. But the other one is actually the real skill. So if I can make this a little bit bigger. Within these kind of standard skills, there are always some standard intents. So one of them is, for example, the launch request. So the launch request is Alexa run hello world, for example. And I will show you, but it will actually output this speech text that is below it. So it's always built up this way that it says, okay, this is the intent, which you can see here as well, but here as well. And it will say, okay, I'm going to output this speech text. It actually does that in this line here. There are some extra things like set session and set should end session. And that means, for example, that if I run this skill and it's done, it will just end the session and won't ask me for anything again. You have all kinds of things like dialogues, and you can go through a whole dialogue. I'm not going to show that right now, but those are things that are set up for those kind of things. So if you don't need the session to end, you don't put this in, for example. Other than that, as I said, you have some standard things that are always in there. So the help intent, for example, as you can see here. So if you say run hello world help, it will give you a help if you set it up the right way. The other one is cancel and stop. I mean, that's, for example, you say run hello world, and while it's running, you're saying Alexa stop. It will stop, and it will actually say goodbye. The other one is the fallback handler. So if it doesn't know what to do, I'm going to show that as well, but if it doesn't know what to do, it will always default to this, and it will say, okay, you can say this to actually do something. And the other two are basically pretty much the same. They will or catch an exception that's not supposed to happen, or they will just end the session. And that handler that you saw in that other file, in this config file, so the hello world handler, as you can see it here, it basically says, okay, get me this hello world, this hello world.py, and do this handler, the one at the bottom. So it knows what to actually execute when the function is being called. And another one of the things that we do is the model. So every Alexa skill has a model, and a model is basically a list of intents. And you can see that the hello world intent is here. So what it will do, sorry, I skipped over the invocation, but the invocation is actually the thing. So when I'm going to run this skill, it will say, I will say run greeter, and then I can say, I can say ask greeter, how are you? Or something like that, or say hi, or whatever, and it will actually do, it will run this intent that you can see here. It's here. So it will run this one because it knows that it's the hello world intent. The other ones, so these are just kind of license files and stuff like that that just come along with the template. And the last one is the skill.json. This is mostly things around the skill. So for example, it will know that my Lambda function will actually be called this, but it will also look at the source directory is this Lambda /pi and then hello world in this case. And the name, of course, of the of the actual skill, and also some example phrases that you can set up so someone knows how to use your skill. Anyone have questions about this?
Yeah, I was wondering, you showed some kind of configuration for the intents.
Yeah, sure.
And you kind of had to hard code all the say hi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you always have to hard code it, or if you say one letter or word different, is there still a way to match this?
No, not at the moment. So you still need to hard code it right now. But there are some things that you can do. There is, for example, a way to assign slots. So that's more to use it as a kind of a variable for a next thing that you want to do. So you could say hi, and then, or let's put it like this. You could say, I want to book a trip to Rotterdam. And then you could say, to Rotterdam is actually the variable or the Rotterdam part. So you know that you can use that as a city in a different scale, or if you want to do something with it. So you can variable a little, you can make a bit of a variable, but you still need to really give what a user can really do. So there's not a real good answer to it right now to make it kind of, you kind of want a wild card, right? So you want to say, okay, if someone says this, then it probably means this as well, or whatever.
Yeah, some natural language parts.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that knows, okay, if I switch these two around, it's still good, right? It's still a valid response. So no, not at the moment, but I think they will add that in the future, of course, to make it easier to, because you can imagine if you're making a skill, you don't want to make, I don't know, a whole list of like 40 things that someone could say to it, just because two things were switched around. So unfortunately not, but I hope they will add that. Anybody else before I go to the deployment? No? Okay. So if I want to deploy this, I can just go to the folder that I that I created. So in this case, I would just say ask deploy. And what it will do for me is actually get this folder, or at least it will first create the skill. So it will create the skill from what I have here, so this whole model that's set up here. And you can see that in the developer console. So when I go to the skills, you will see that it actually created the hello world skill there. And when you go into it, you will see that the invocation is greeter, as you can see it here. And it will create the hello world intent the same way as we set it up here. So I can just add something right now and then later on deploy it again. It will just add it to the model. So it actually created my function as well, so I'm going to show that as well. But this is set up, so I can already test it. So you can test it within the developer console, so you don't even need an echo for actually testing the skill. So you can say, ask greeter, hi.
Hello, Python world from decorators.
So that means that it will map it, and you can see that it will output this text to speech. And of course, I can do it on the echo as well. Alexa, ask greeter to say hi. So it's the same thing. So everything is connected to each other, and you always have everything working in that way, so you can test it here. And you can also see, that's something else, so there are some echoes that have a screen. So if you want to put something on the screen, that's the way you can do it as well. You can see that it does it by actually using this simple card thing and say speech text. So the speech text is, of course, this text that's up here. So what do I need to do if I want to change this? So if I want to change what it's actually saying, I can just change this to Developers.nl. And what I could do now is actually deploy, and I would deploy everything. But you can also say, I want to deploy just the function, because I've just changed the function up. I didn't change the whole skill. So I can just say this, and it will, it's not dot, it's minus t, it's actually. And then that will deploy my, as you can see, it will update the Lambda function. So to show that Lambda function, because you obviously want to see what's happening there. This is the whole Lambda function. So you can't see anything right now, but normally there would be code here if you just set it up without doing anything. But because this environment that we are uploading is too big, it will not show it as an inline coding. So you can't change the code inline. So it's updated my Lambda function. I can test it right now. Ask Alexa, ask reader to say hi.
Hello, Developers.nl.
So that's basically it. It's really easy just to manipulate that and set something else. And as I said, the Lambda function is just this particular code or this folder. In this folder, you can see that there are a lot of packages and stuff like that, but you see that the hello world is there. So this would be uploaded to AWS, and when we do a call, and we do a call by, you can actually see the connection between those two here. So basically the endpoint thing points to a particular Lambda function. This is just the placeholder for that. As you can see, it says custom hello world default, and that's actually the name of the or the ID of this function. So it knows I need to hit that one and see if the intent is there. If it is, then I'm going to actually execute it. The handler part that we saw a little bit earlier is here as well. So you can see that the hello world handler is here. You will see that in the different, the other examples that I have, it will be different. So it would be a different name. So I was what we were talking about a little bit about the slot. So you can probably say how are you, and then so this is basically it. So you would create a slot that will say city. That could be Rotterdam. That could be anything. It doesn't make sense in this case, but that's the way you could actually put in the variable if you want to have a variable for this intent, for example. So you have this option here as well for coding, and this only works if you have a hosted skill. So you can set up skills without doing this whole shebang with the thing that I did with the Ask CLI. You can actually do that. It only supports Node at the moment. It doesn't support Python or something else. But if you want to do that, you can, and it will be hosted by Amazon. You don't have to do anything. You just need to change the code. You will get some inline code that you can actually change here, and then it will work as well. I didn't use it because I wanted to show the Python example, but that's something that you could do. And other than that, you also have in the developers console, you also have a way to actually see analytics. So how many times has this skill been questioned in the last day or the last 30 days or whatever. And you can see which intents are being called and stuff like that. So they have a pretty good analytics setup for people that are calling the function. So if we go back, this is all cool because it's really easy to set up the hello world, but if you really want to change something else and you want to do something with, for example, external APIs or whatever, I'm going to show that right now. So I did create a skill that we have health checks. That's kind of a service to see if cron jobs are working or whatever. And I created a skill that can actually see in that API, okay, did everything run okay? If it was, then you're going to say this. If it doesn't run, then you're going to say this. So I'm going to show that project a little bit. And you'll see that it has a little bit more requirements. So if I go to this one, I actually deployed it already, so that's a little bit different than normal. But if you go into the Lambda, you will see that I have a requirements.txt, which has a little bit more, it has more requirements. So one thing that I noticed when I was setting this up a few days ago because of the thing that I had, it doesn't automatically add those requirements. So if you add the requirement now, it won't, at next deploy, it won't add that new requirement that you put in. That's actually where those hooks come in. If you do it like this, it will save you a few hours of your life, because that's what it cost me to find out that it does this. So when you add a requirement, you can actually run this post new hook thing. If you do it, then it will add it to that .venv folder. It will add it to that. You can run the deploy and it will go great. So you still need to do this shell script before you, if you have new requirements before you deploy. So that's something that I noticed that was a little bit weird. I was like, okay, why isn't it showing my new requirements that I added? That's something that to keep in mind if you want to do something with this. Other than that, what's different about this cron job thing? So this is the intent. It's it has a little bit more things in it, but basically what it does, it will go to this API, it will get everything that's in there, and it will see, okay, how many checks are down. If there are checks that are down, it will output this text. If there are no checks that are down, then it will just say that it ran successfully. So that's pretty much the intent that I created. And when you go to the skill.json, you will see that I updated some things like, okay, how can you do this skill before, for example, ask cron and stuff like that. And the name, you can ask cron if everything is okay and stuff like that. So this is pretty much something that I changed. And when you look at the model, you will see that the invocation name is different, but also the cron job intent, it has different samples. So I'm going to say ask cron for information instead of to say hi or whatever. So I already deployed this one, so I can either test it again here. So in this test environment, you can also test other skills that you are not working on at the moment. So for example, you can say ask greeter hi.
Hello, Developers.nl.
And it will still do that even though it's a different skill. So this test environment is pretty much for your whole Amazon Echo. So to go back to that cron example, I deployed it. You will see that the invocation name is cron, and the cron job intent has been set up the way I've put it in that JSON file as well. So let's try it. I'm not going to try it on my laptop. I'm going to do it on the Echo. Alexa, ask cron if everything is okay.
All the cron jobs ran successfully.
So it takes a little second, but that's mostly because it needs to get it from the API and actually put it back. But I could, of course, do it here as well if everything is okay.
All the cron jobs ran successfully.
It's exactly the same, but with a little bit more output, so you can see what actually happened. So I was thinking, and I was like, okay, what can I do more than this? Because there's, of course, a little bit more to show. I thought about SendGrid. SendGrid is the way we send out all our emails. So every email that we send out as tevreden.nl goes through SendGrid. And I want to show that you can call that API as well. It's a little bit different, but it's still in the realm as the cron job. I will get to an even more complicated example in a minute. So when we take that one, so to clarify a little bit, I've started these projects like the SendGrid one, but also the cron job one from a Hello World template. They don't really have a boilerplate thing. You just need to pick one of those templates that they already give you and edit them yourself. It's a little bit cumbersome because in this case you need to, everywhere there's Hello World, you need to change it and make it reflect the one that you want to show. But if you look at the SendGrid one, this is the basic intent. It will get me the metrics and it will eventually say how many emails we sent and also how many people opened it and also how many people clicked on it. Same thing, skill.json has been updated. The model has been updated so you know what you're doing. So I'm going to show this one as well. It's a different skill. The invocation will be SendGrid, but the actual thing will be for information or stats. So I can say, Alexa, ask SendGrid stats. Didn't do it. Alexa, ask SendGrid stats. We're not doing it. Here it is.
2,101 mails today. The amount of mails opened is 1,507, and 686 people clicked on the link.
So you can see what you can do with this. So you can basically get from any API that you can call, you can get the statistics, make some speech to text, and for example, this thing is on my desk the whole day. So sometimes when some people want to know how many emails we sent out, I just have to say this, and it will actually say how many emails we sent out. Instead of people coming at my desk, they can yell at themselves if they want to. But that's pretty much the basic stuff that you can do with calling a different API and stuff like that. So if we go to a little bit more complex things, I'm going to use AWS 3 for this demo. Does anyone know what S3 is? If someone doesn't know, let me know. Basically, it's just a storage thing that you can put files on. I'll be using it to create an image analyzer, which gets an image from S3. It will pass it through recognition. Recognition is an image analyzer by Amazon. You just pass it an image and it will say, okay, for example, I'm going to take an example of celebrities. It will say the image is of this celebrity, for example. So when you look at it schematically, it will, of course, it will ask the Alexa skill. It will go through Lambda, get the latest picture that I uploaded, pass it through that recognition stuff, and then give it back to the eventual user. So, going back to the skill. So this is the actual skill. I'm using the AWS SDK as it's called, but basically what it will do, a bucket is like a folder. It will look into this folder. It will get all the the files that are in there and look at the latest one, so the latest uploaded one, and it will see if there is a celebrity in there. If there is, it will say the picture, the person in the picture is celebrity, or it will say I couldn't recognize that celebrity. So I've set up that skill as well. So if you want to look at it, it's this one. And I can say, ask analyzer to analyze, or ask analyzer to analyze my image. And the first image that I'm going to analyze, I'm going to show you. I have a picture of Beyonce here. Everybody knows her, I think. But let's see if the Echo knows her as well, or recognition knows her as well. So let's try and just do that. Alexa, ask analyzer to analyze.
The person in the picture is Beyonce.
Okay, so some people will say I'm cheating because there is Beyonce in the name. But to show you that I'm not cheating, I'm going to take this picture of a random celebrity. I can show you the picture as well. I think people know him. But it would be cool if recognition actually saw that it's him. So we're going to try it. I'm going to upload his image. And it will say, of course, random celeb. So let's try again. Alexa, ask analyzer to analyze.
The person in the picture is Gordon Hugo-Roth.
It does know. I don't know how it does know it, but it does know. Well, I tried another one. While I was doing this, I was like, okay, if it knows this one, then René Vroger, I don't know if everybody knows him probably. And I tried it and I said, okay, I just want to see if it knows this. Because Gordon was already impressive, but if it does know this, then it's even more impressive. Let's see. So I'm going to do it again. Alexa, ask Analyzer to analyze my image. No, it doesn't know that one. So, but it kind of shows you that you can, by using the services that AWS provides, but this is the same for Google, you can build something that's really easy to build. It doesn't require me to host any servers, set something up. Of course, you need to set up the skill, but you can just deploy it, try it out, and see what it's actually delivering. So, also, what is a good point to make is that while I was trying this, you always have some failures or it doesn't work or whatever. What's good about Lambda is that it actually logs everything that you are doing. So by just going through the function and clicking on view logs, you can see all the requests that have been made. You don't see the actual response, but you do see the requests that are made. What's interesting here is also the cost. So when you do this, sorry, yeah. So what happens if you don't get a response back? For example? Yeah, it does. It just says that it didn't expect it, or it just gives you an exception. It's a little bit hard. The reason being is in some cases I had that it didn't even hit this. So it didn't hit this, this function, and I was like, okay, but why? Why is it not working? And that's a little bit of the tricky part of the skills development. You don't really have an option to run it yourself locally and then say, okay, I want to see what's happening. They are creating that right now, so you can run it locally and see, okay, what was actually the error that was sent? Because I don't see it in some cases here. That's also a hard part about, I had some issues with setting up, for example, the recognition part. I was like, okay, why doesn't it work? And then it didn't log it here. And then you need to really look at your code and see what actually was happening. That's why it's unfortunate that they stopped that Flask Ask project as well, because that you could set that up locally and just proxy it through, and then you would see the actual logs and actually what's going through. So that's unfortunate. That's one of the unfortunate things about it not being there anymore. But it will just give you a random error, and it will say, okay, the requested skills response did not give you a good action, something like that. But yeah, that's the thing. In some cases you can see it, and in some cases it will actually be logged here. I think I have some examples of when it went wrong, because it doesn't always go good. Yeah, so it will give you, for example, unable to find a suitable request handler. Yeah, okay, then you know then that your function, that handler that we set up in the first project is not correct, right? But it will give you a random error. That's basically what happens. So this is good, especially if you want to just debug and see, okay, what happened to that request that I did, and why did it give me an exception? Why? I don't know. One other thing, of course, is that if you put in something that Alexa doesn't get, for example.
The analyzer skill can't help you with that. You can say hello.
Yeah, so this is actually one of those fallback things that you have set up. So I think it's here, can't. Yeah, so you have the fallback handler that's actually giving you back that it can't help you with that. So that's the reason why when you work from that template, it will give you some standard fallback or standard cancel things, because if you don't set it up, it will give you just an exception and that's it. And in this case, it will always give you something back. Yeah, you could. You could probably say, okay, what was the actual response, and then put it out, just output it to the speech text. I don't know if it would help. That's a different thing, but you could, of course, say, okay, if I got this response back, then do this and say this, or if you got this response back, do this, right? So I think that's your question. You can do that. You can set it up. There are all kinds of handler inputs and response builder, all kinds of stuff. There's a really great documentation about the SDK, about what you can do. Also the slots that I was talking about a little bit. You can all give that back. It's all in there, and you can just read the documentation for that. It's really good. I had some issues with it as well, but that's more in the sense that it's a little bit scattered, so we need to find out where the actual documentation for a particular thing is. But for the SDK, it's all in one place, and you can just read it there. So going back, when you see these kind of demos, you can see the potential, right? So there is a lot of potential in this area, and I think that it will be just more and more all the time. So at the moment, there's roughly 133 million smart speakers in the world, in people's houses, in offices, or whatever. So there is a huge market that's starting, and when we look at the Netherlands, it's still a little market. It's still growing. You can see that the Google Home has made an impact a little bit because of the Dutch language that it supports. But you can imagine that this will only go up. So there will be only more and more smart speakers than we have today. And that's also what I want to give back a little bit, is that this is still kind of gimmicky. So everybody's like, okay, yeah, okay, you can create a skill, you can say this. It's still kind of gimmicky, but it won't go away. It will only get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And that's something that I would like to say to you guys as well, is that when you do create for it, this is going to be a huge market, not right now, maybe, but it will be a huge market in a few years. And that's also one of the reasons why I'm doing this talk, because it is easy to set up. You can do all kinds of stuff with it, but it is something that's going to grow and grow more. And I think it will be one of the interfaces in the future that we are all going to use, in combination maybe with a screen, what they are already doing with some of the Echo devices. And when you ask something, it will give you back some feedback. I saw something about the housing corporations that are in the Netherlands are going to start doing experiments with it. So, for example, I have a leakage in my house. I can just say, okay, fix my leakage, or make a request for that, or whatever. So it will be more and more. And you can see Samsung has the voice assistant, Bixby. You can talk about it all you want, but they do have the whole ecosystem. So they have all the kind of equipment next to it. So your microwave, your your oven, everything will be connected through those voice assistants that you can just call and say, okay, I don't know why you would talk to your microwave, but you will probably be able to in the near future. So it's a big market. It's still very much in the kind of starting phase, in my opinion, because even setting up these skills in the last 3 days was frustrating, to say the least. But if you do know these kind of things that I just showed you, it makes it a lot easier to set up. And, sorry, yeah.
Things you just show work in different languages.
Yeah, so, but you need to set it up for those languages as well, of course. So I set it up for example, you have you have English US, but you can, when you look at the model, you can see that it actually has EN US. So if you have Spanish, for example, you need to change it because you want to, for example, instead of analyze, it would be something else, right? Because in Spanish, you're not going to say this and this and then to analyze. It doesn't make sense. So you can change that. You can set it up differently for other languages. There are a few that they support right now. I can probably show you which ones. Yeah, so you can add a new language. So these are the languages that they support right now. So they have English in all kinds of ways. I don't know why, but probably because of some language thing. Also, I've noticed that when you set it to English UK, you get Alexa in a kind of English UK voice. So that's probably why they did it. But you have French and of course German, Italian, Japanese, Portuguese, and all those on the screen. So if you want to set it up differently, you can, but you need to put it in your skill. Sorry? So in one file, you mean? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if you can, to be honest, because they really look at these kind of files, right? So you really need to have all these files, all these separate language files for all these separate languages. I'm not sure if you can, for example, if you, in my opinion, it would be logical if you have English just one and that's it, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense to make 5 language files because there's English India here. That does make sense to me, but I think maybe it can be done, but it will probably involve this not being in en.us, but like en.json. I think it works like that. So you can probably just cut off the US part and then put it and see if it works. I think it could be a good one. Yeah, sure.
Before you upload the image in S3 one by one,
Yeah.
how Alexa is going to recognize which image is going to, when you ask it,
Ah.
which is this person. So basically, if you have in storage 100 of image, which image is going to recognize in this moment?
Yeah. And so the question is, which image is it going to pick up and actually push through recognition? So what I do is actually, when you see it here, it's a little bit weird to do it this way, but there's no correct way to do it in S3. Yeah, it just takes the last one, so the last modified. So it looks at this date, so the last modified date, and it takes the last one. So if I upload a new one now, it will just take that one. It always looks at the last one. But probably you could create it and say, okay, look at, I don't know, image.jpg within this S3 bucket and show me who's there. But that would mean that you need to, instead of doing this, what I'm doing right now, take something from the something from the scale itself. So for example, I say ask analyzer to analyze image.jpg and then push it through and see what's going to happen. So currently it's just taking the last one. That's it, the last uploaded one. To come back to that final thing about the smart speaker, so around 60% is Alexa right now, and Alexa is going to go off the whole time. But it's a huge market share, so I think they were the first or one of the first, and that's also the reason why there is a lot of them. I think that a lot of them also are most of them will be in America right now. It's kind of hard to get an Echo right now if you want to have it in the Netherlands, but you can do it through Amazon.de, and you would have to search for the international version. There's an international version that I ordered as well. So if you want to do it, there's a huge market to pick up. And that concludes the presentation, and of course you can find me on these on Developers.nl or the second one. The second one is actually my podcast. I run a podcast with a lot of interesting people in the Netherlands, and please check it out. If you want to ask me something, go ahead, and we'll talk as well after. Thank you. Questions? Sander.
On these conversationele, you uploaded. If
Mm-hmm.
I want to run those on different speakers, you have to log in with your user account, your Amazon account?
No.
Or is there another way to share with different users?
Yeah, so if you want to distribute, because that's actually what you want to do, there is an option for that. I didn't look at it yet, to be honest. But there is a distribution channel. So they have a store where you can actually upload these skills to, and then other people can install it. So say, for instance, you create a skill that's kind of a quiz or something like that. You can add it here, just fill in all these kind of things, and it will be sent to Amazon. They will review it, see if there is any weird things in there, and eventually it will become something in the skill store that you can just look up and see and try. So that's how you can distribute it to other people as well.
If you want to the public,
Yeah.
and if you want to distribute like privately within the company, like a tool set for analyzing, what you
Yeah, well, you would have to set it up yourself. That's a
set it up on each account.
Yeah, on each Amazon account. Yeah, because everything is linked to my account right now, of course. So everything is linked to my Amazon account. So it knows, okay, if I need to set up this Lambda function, it knows, okay, this is the Amazon account on the web services as well. Just upload it there and it will do it. So it is linked to my account right now. So you can use the Echo, of course. I mean, but if you want to really develop something at it and deploy new versions, you would have to set it up yourself. Yeah. That's the point with the local development as well. Because if you can do that, it would make it easier because someone could just run it locally and then put in a different endpoint. So you can put in a different endpoint. Currently, it's a Lambda function. It will be a direct connection to that Lambda function. But you can also see that it has HTTPS as well. So you can just put in a URL if you have set it up there, and it will target that instead of the Lambda function that you already set up. So there's multiple ways to run it, but for development, it usually will come to you doing it in your own account, and that's it. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think most skills you've made, you've shown are kind of call and response.
Yep.
It's easy to make something that's more conversational, that you
Yeah.
follow up on some query.
Yeah, I didn't go into it right now, but you do have kind of the dialogue, as I said, the dialogue delegation strategy. So you can link together these intents. So you start off with the one intent, and we'll ask you, for example, if we look at the example of Developers.nl, we do research. So what you could do was, run survey, for example. And it will say, okay, what did you find of our service? Give us a grade between 1 and 10, right? And you would say 7, right? And it will say, it will just continue. It uses those slots as well that I mentioned before. So it will say, if you say at the end a 5, and it will say, okay, the 5 is my grade, so I will pick that up and go through that. It can actually be persistent as well, so you can couple this with other things like DynamoDB, which is a database on Amazon. So there's a lot of ways you can go with that. I didn't go into it right now because it's a lot more complex when you go into that, but that is a fair thing that you are going to do, right? So there are all those examples that you have. For example, if I take an example of, I think there's a quiz example. Quiz Alexa.
Maybe one quick follow-up. Can you also refer to another intent in another skill? So is it aware
I don't think so. I don't think so. Because it doesn't know that skill, right? So it's outside of the realm of what the skill is at the moment.
if the skill is available or something?
Yeah, that's a good one. I haven't tried that. But I think that you could probably do that because they have an API. So they have the Alexa API that you can call as well. I think you can do it through that. So there is a whole API ecosystem around the skills and how many skills you have in there and everything like that. So I think you can just call that and see which skills you have in there and maybe pick one of those skills that you have set up. So when I look at this one, because that's one of the, I think you can see it here. So this is a quiz example. It's a little bit, as you can see, it's a little bit more complex because you need to handle the answers that someone gives and stuff like that. So that's also the reason why I didn't do it, because it involves a lot more code just to be able to handle all kinds of different. For example, if you say, give me a grade, and someone says, yeah, it was great. What do you do with that, right? It's not an 8, it's not a 7, it's nothing, right? It's just great. Yeah. And you need to handle all those kind of those kinds of options. So that's also the reason. But you can look at these examples because they are pretty good. These are things that they wrote themselves, right? That can show you how, for example, a quiz would work or an actual conversation and stuff like that. So I would, if you want to get into it, look at those kind of samples that they have because they are really good. But they are very complex if you look at what they actually do.
What's the difference with services like Siri or Google Assistant, and why did you decide to show this one?
Yeah, I don't think there's a big difference, to be honest. I haven't used the Google Assistant. I haven't tried it yet. Also Siri, I didn't try anything with that yet. But I used Alexa mainly because we are already on AWS. So we use AWS for almost everything. So it was a little bit of it's a fast switch, right? So for example, I know Sander in the corner uses Google, right? He will probably pick Google Assistant first over, for example, Alexa, because they already have their infrastructure there and stuff like that. So that's the reason why I picked it. But it's just a personal preference, right? I don't think that a Google Assistant can do less than Alexa or whatever. It will be comparable in that sense. But that's the reason why we picked that. And of course, you could pick the Google Assistant. I don't mind, but it's more because we already are there, right? So we already have Amazon. Why not?
Could you elaborate a bit on the AWS infrastructure that you use?
Sure.
Because you are connecting to an S3 bucket.
Yep.
I'm asking because we are working in a corporate environment and we have to use security groups
Yep.
to get things connected, and we're struggling a lot with that, and you make it seem
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
all these things connected, because now it seems to just kind of work out as S3 bucket and scale it.
Yeah. Yeah, good question. I forgot to mention it actually, so it's good that you brought it up. So your question is to how can you couple these things together with security and stuff like that. So when you look at a skill, or a function rather, when you look at the function, you can set up a trigger. So on the left side are all the triggers that can trigger this function. So the Alexa Skills Kit, currently everybody could call this function, right? But you can add, I don't know why I can't add it right now, but you can add, I think I can just delete it. No. Well, in normal cases, you could add the skill ID here. So it knows that only from this skill, when it's this skill, you can actually call the function. So that's one way of already securing that part. The other one, the recognition part, because that's what you're using, or the S3, you have to give explicit access. So you need to add an execution role. And an execution role is nothing more than a set of things that they can do. So the execution role in this case, it's automatically created, but you can add things to it. So currently, I have added full access. Normally, you wouldn't do that, of course, but you would add just S3 access, and then on the bucket itself, you would say, okay, only this function can, for example, call this particular S3 bucket. So that's the way kind of the security can work, right? So you need to set up. That's something that I noticed as well, because I was doing this, is that I needed to add this. If you don't add this, it just won't work. It will say, okay, I can't get to the bucket, and that's it. So that's the way it's kind of set up permission-wise. But for the normal ones that I already did without the recognition part, you don't even have to do anything, because everything is in the code. You don't need to add these kind of policies and stuff like that.
Because then you have enough to use in the Alexa environment, right?
Yeah, you don't need it because you're actually calling an external API, and you're already, I have an API key, I can just call it, and that's it. So, so that's the way you can set up the kind of security stuff. Okay?
Do you have a production application running?
No. Quick answer, no. No, but it was kind of also the reason why we started with the Echo, with experimenting with it, because we did want to create something, but when I was testing it was about a year ago, something like that. They weren't this far with the dialogues. So you could do some simple dialogues, but they are getting more and more complex, so you can do more and more with it. So it could be something that we do in the future, that we say, we place this echo somewhere for a particular client or whatever, and people can actually fill in a survey by just talking to the echo, instead of filling in a questionnaire or whatever. I don't have anything running yet, but it is something that we're looking into because we want to do it. Sure, yeah.
Why you need Lambda full access to this kind of service and you didn't use only simple API for recognition or S3?
Sorry, I didn't hear you correctly, sorry.
So basically, in YAML, you are using full access.
Yep.
Lambda in S3 and recognition.
Yeah.
Why?
It's just convenience, to be honest. In a production environment, you wouldn't do this. You wouldn't give, as mentioned before, of course you wouldn't do a full access, but I wanted to set it up quickly, and then I would just set it up. I'm the only one using it at the moment anyway. I'm going to remove this after the talk as well. But of course, you wouldn't do full access. You would just say, okay, give me this access to S3, but with this bucket policy or whatever. So of course, security-wise, you wouldn't set it up for a production scale anyway, like this. So, does that answer your question? Okay, sure. Anyone else? Yeah.
Does it always need up-to-date input? I saw some test functions in which you type in.
Where? Sorry.
When you were testing the skills.
Oh, here. Yeah.
This is an API. Can you just find another?
Yeah. Good point. So, the Ask CLI actually has a dialog function, and I have to look at it what it was. So this one. So you can test it there, but as the Ask CLI also has a kind of test function in there. So when I do Ask dialog, as I did right now, it will pick up, and I can say Ask greeter hi. Does take a little bit more. Oh, sure.
If you have an application that monitors like the health of servers, and text is something you call about, can it send a message to
Like that. So that it triggers something based on something that happens in your infrastructure. I haven't seen it yet, to be honest. It usually only responds based on what you asked it. So you really need to ask, okay, run this, or that's also the reason why they have that kind of run thing in front of it, or begin, or launch, or whatever. They really need to know that it's a skill that you're actually targeting right now. So they don't have anything that's triggered by something else that's happening within your infrastructure. So you could, for example, you could have a function that is running and that's checking something, a Lambda function or whatever, and it would trigger the skill, right? That would be logical to do, but it doesn't do it right now. It doesn't have it right now.
Can you test it with the audio hardware of your laptop, for example?
Yeah, so that's what I actually did with the developer console as well. So this, I don't need an echo to actually test my skill. I would just say, ask greeter hi. And this is actually from my laptop.
Hello, Developers.nl.
So, yeah, you can also use the microphone, of course. Yeah, sorry, yeah. So you can ask greeter hi.
Just to confirm, you'd like to hear the song Sorry Not Sorry?
I could do that song. Ask greeter hi. Oh, sorry. Click it. Ask greeter hi. Oh. Ask greeter hi.
I think you were asking for the song Sorry
Again.
Not Sorry. Is that right?
Anyway, you can test it like that. It's not doing it. But that's the way you could test it also with your microphone on your laptop. Yeah, correct. Anyone else? Sorry Not Sorry is going to be my anthem for a round. Nobody else? Okay, thank you.
Dankjewel, Amer.
Graag gedaan.
Leuk gedaan, ja, absoluut.
Zeker.
Een kleinigheidje voor jou.
Super, mooi man.
Beste Rotterdamse bier van de wereld.
Ah, kijk.
Ongelooflijk bekend, Kaapse Brouwers.
Mooi man.
Dus ik hoop je vanuit.
Zeker, gaan we doen. Dankjewel.
Jullie bedankt voor je aandacht en leuke vragen. Nog kun je terug kunnen kijken naar kant van ons YouTube kanaal. Dat wordt zo waarschijnlijk getoond, denk ik. Dat zijn de foto's scherm. Developers.nl YouTube. Mark, die foto's maakt, die gaat een mooi blog terug beschrijven, dus je kan ook nog teruglezen wat hij ervan gevonden heeft. En nou, zo meteen staan we leuk op tafel op de bar dan ook, dus blijf even lekker hangen en dan spreek ik even. Dankjewel.
Yes.